Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is my wonderful Period 3 AP Bio class. Say hi. Hi. Okay, thank you, sir. And last class, we went over the different categories of hormones. Protein hormones, how do they work? Do they enter a cell? What do protein hormones do? They bind to a receptor on the cell membrane and trigger a... Okay, so that could be an ion, or we looked at an example like cyclic AMP, right? Okay, whereas lipid hormones can go, because they're lipids, right? Steroid hormones, they can go through, the phospholipid bilayer and bind to a receptor inside and then work all the way into the nucleus and act as a transcription factor, or they can get something going on in the cytoplasm as well. We talked about ways to do feedback. Positive feedback is when we're what? Increasing, amping up. The stimulus is creating even more of a response until you reach some climactic condition like giving birth or something like that. And negative feedback, we're trying to keep it at a set point. Good. And contrary hormones can do that, right? For instance, the pancreas insulin we talked about. The insulin glucagon from the pancreas. Insulin does what to our blood sugar levels? Lowers it, and glucagon raises it. Perfect. Okay, then I had you watch an egg puzzle and you went through all the hormones, and I think you know some of these already. I bet you know a thing or two. And so what I'm going to have, okay. So what I'm going to have you do, just a second, I gotta take out period 1 out of here. Hang on 1 second here. Is I'm going to have you match the hormone with the function, and let me just remove these students. Okay, and you can be, today we were a color, so be a color. Oh, chartreuse.
I've never done that before.
Great, like my life.
Okay. What happens is you're going to learn it and then you're going to forget it. You're going to end up having it. What I do is I just read over the notes. Don't study, just read the notes. Make sure you understand.
Mild black.
Look up stuff you don't get. And then just ask.
All right, hurry up and get in with your color. And then you're going to start matching these. I encourage you to do it independently just to see where you're at and how many of these hormones you already know. So yeah, you've got to bring them here, okay, and then you would match whatever the function is. And I'm going to go ahead and pause this. Wow. All right, I hope you're done. I want to move on. Hopefully you match those up. We're going to start with the most difficult kind of connection. If you get this, you'll be fine. Okay, hypothalamus, that is in your brain. Okay, hypothalamus in your brain. Okay, below the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, not testes, pituitary gland. It has 2 lobes, anterior pituitary, posterior pituitary. Okay, during development, when you were just a little embryo, okay, the posterior pituitary descended down out of the hypothalamus. And so the hypothalamus has neurosecretory cells. Do you remember when we talked about that in the introduction? We talked where they're kind of like a nervous tissue, but kind of like, they act like a cell that, that's glandular because it makes a hormone. Remember that part? Okay. These neurosecretory cells extend down into the posterior pituitary. And they're a part, like direct connection, hypothalamus to pituitary. The anterior pituitary doesn't have that type of connection because the anterior pituitary during development grew up, and can I get your eyes up here please, just so I can hear that, see that you're listening. The anterior pituitary grew up and out of your mouth region, came up and it globbed on. So it doesn't have a direct connection to the hypothalamus. So in this case, the neurosecretory cells can extend only into the stalk. That's as far as they have. But yet, the hypothalamus is full on nervous tissue, and the pituitary gland is full on what? Gland. And remember we talked about maintaining homeostasis. What 2 systems are primary in that? Nervous and endocrine. Who's faster? Nervous. So these are direct connection, and if they have to maintain that homeostasis, and it's no trouble controlling the post pit, There's only 2 categories of hormones that are coming out of there. There's several hormones that come out of the anterior pituitary. And if the hypothalamus just secreted it into a capillary as far as the stalk, that blood would then eventually get back to the heart, then go to your lungs, then come back to the heart, and then some of that blood with some of that concentration of that hormone would then get to the anterior pituitary. That would be a slower process than if it could go directly to it. So this is where you have one of those double capillary situations. Where have we seen other examples of double capillaries? In the kidney. The first set of capillaries was called the glomerulus, and everything came out. And the second set of capillaries were called the peritubular capillaries, and you took things back, tubular reabsorption, right? Or you got rid of it through tubular secretion, right? Okay, where was the other place where we saw double capillaries? Small intestines and the liver. So that way we wouldn't have too much or too little in our blood sugar, so it gets shunted immediately from the small intestines over to the liver via the portal vein. You're so smart. Okay, so here's condition number 3. And so the first set of capillaries get as far as the stalk, and what the hypothalamus does there is it puts in releasing hormones in the stalk capillaries. That's as far as the neurosecretory cells get. They put in releasing hormones. Those releasing hormones get carried by the blood to the second set of capillaries in the anterior pituitary. And so those releasing hormones impact the tissues of the anterior pituitary. What pushes those releasing hormones out into the anterior pituitary? Hydrostatic pressure. Boom, shakalaka. So when hydrostatic pressure forces out those releasing hormones, now that tells the anterior pituitary what to do. The anterior pituitary goes, oh, okay. And so then the anterior pituitary secretes stimulating hormones. Those stimulating hormones get put back into that second set of capillaries, right? There's in and out, right? Reabsorbed by what kind of pressure? Osmotic pressure, which then gets in the blood to the heart, to the lungs, to the heart, and out to the body. And this way you don't have to wait for a lungs, heart, body, maneuver twice. It's just first set, releasing hormones, second set comes out, triggers the anterior pituitary what to do, and then, oh, Swedish, thank you. Will you tell her thank you for me? Okay. And then can immediately trigger the pituitary gland. Now, I want to go over with you the different hormones that are secreted, and so you have a good understanding of why this pituitary gland right here is called the master gland. Okay, so let's look at some of the different hormones. Don't get scared. I'll walk you through it, okay? So we're going to start up here with the posterior pituitary. Now, the posterior pituitary, if you look at this picture here, okay? The posterior pituitary extends directly down, the neurosecretory cells extend directly down into the posterior pituitary. In fact, these neurosecretory cells make the hormones secreted by the posterior pituitary. It's just like its own little storage facility. It just reaches down there, it makes the hormones, and then there are secondary nerve cells that tell it when to secrete those hormones that it's stored. Those 2 hormones that it secretes are oxytocin and ADH. Now, you already know about ADH. What is ADH about? What does it stand for? Anti-diuretic hormone. If I don't want to die, I need to reabsorb some water out of my, where in my kidneys? I agree. Collecting ducts of my kidneys. Remember, a collecting duct can be shared by several nephrons, right? And so you reabsorb the water out of the collecting duct so you don't die, you don't become dehydrated. So that's ADH, anti-diuretic hormone. The second hormone secreted by the posterior pituitary is oxytocin. You already learned about oxytocin and positive feedback, right? Remember what oxytocin makes you do? Yeah, it makes your uterus contract to push out the baby. Okay? And this is amazing, and I don't know if I taught you this already, it's all a blur to me, but once you push out that baby, what are you going to need to do for that baby? Breastfeed him, right? Feed him. Oxytocin is the out hormone. Not only does it push out the baby, but it makes your milk come out. Now there is a different hormone called prolactin, which makes you make milk in your breastises, okay? That's a different hormone secreted by the anterior pituitary, by the way. prolactin. What do you hear in that? Lactose, yeah. So it makes the milk, but oxytocin makes the milk come out. And initially when the milk comes out, it can be stimulated by hearing a baby cry. And then all of a sudden you're just like, and it's just out, okay? It could, if something could touch your breast, it could make the milk come out. It's an amazing little thing there. But later on, as you nurse a little bit longer, then usually it's just your baby who will do that, you know? And then anyway, so that letdown part is done by oxytocin. So now we already know the two hormones by the posterior pituitary. And this is stupid, but this will work for you. Imagine a woman like olden days, maybe she's an Indian woman, I don't know, walking, you know, and she's like, have I already told you this? No. I need to have a baby now, so I'm just going to hang on to this post and push out my baby, okay? So she hangs onto the post. Why am I saying post? For posterior pituitary, okay? Okay. And out comes the baby. Or maybe you're really tired and you're like, I have to go pee. Let me hang on to this post and I will pee. Okay, it is the out hormone. And that will, you'll be surprised how often you will go to that posterior pituitary. So those are those two. Now, thank you, Ms. Tia. So go to your notes on hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. The introduction. The hypothalamus helps regulate the internal environment through the ANS. What does that stand for? Autonomic nervous system. You go, girl. Through the ANS. And the glandular secretions of the pituitary gland. And the glandular secretions of the pituitary gland. The posterior pituitary, the control is directly, maybe you want to highlight that, directly by the hypothalamus, who has neurosecretory cells extending into the post-pit. The hormones, oxytocin, okay, because you're pushing out that baby. Uterine contractions. Just 1 second. Uterine contractions and milk release. I'll go back to number 2, 1 more second. Uterine contractions and milk release. And then ADH controls the, what organ? Kidneys, causing water reabsorption. Is the amount of water you reabsorb, is that really important to homeostasis? Yes. Okay. As are many of these glands that we're going to talk about that the anterior pituitary controls. So that's why in number 2, the pituitary is identified as the master gland. Master gland, because it controls so many other glandular secretions. I would like oldest bio buddy in the introduction to explain number 3. Explain IYOW in your own words. Number 3. Go. Yes. All right. That's our post-pit. Direct connect. The post-pit stores those two hormones, oxytocin and ADH. ADH is underneath the umbrella of a vasopressin, if you ever see that. It's a vasopressin. Anterior pituitary is different. Remember, anterior pituitary is not directly connected. How far do those neurosecretory cells reach? As far as the stalk of the pituitary gland. Okay? And there it puts in releasing hormones, which are carried by the blood to the anterior pituitary, and it tells the anterior pituitary who it needs to stimulate. And the anterior pituitary will secrete stimulating hormones. Stimulating hormones. And here you can see a wide variety of what it stimulates. Let's do like the easiest ones first. Ones we've already talked about. So I talked about prolactin. What is prolactin going to do? And then I'll help you with your notes. Just go here. Prolactin makes you make the milk, okay? So there's that one, we got that down. Okay, this one is GH, it stands for growth hormone. So what do you think it's gonna have you do? Grow. What's the target gonna be? Muscles and your bones. Okay, so there's two, okay? If we look at this one is the thyroid gland right here, and it stimulates it with thyroid stimulating hormone, right? Okay, so, and we'll talk about the thyroid gland in a little bit, but that has a lot to do with your metabolism and your levels of calcium in your blood, but we'll talk about that when we talk about the thyroid gland. So now we know three. Here's one, ACTH, adrenal corticotropic hormone. Have we learned that one before? Yeah, we already talked about it. We talked about the kidneys a little bit, because adrenal corticotropic hormone stimulates the adrenal cortex. And then we'll talk about what hormones come out of the adrenal gland in just a little bit. And then here we have FSH and LH. FSH and LH stand for follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Both of these are under the category of gonadotropins. What do you hear in gonadotropins? Gonads. Yeah. And follicle stimulating hormone, what that comes from is in females' ovaries. The egg is in a little jacket. There's a little jacket around it called a follicle. Follicle stimulating hormone stimulates egg development. So if it does that in females, what must it do in guys? Yeah, sperm. Follicle stimulating hormone gets the egg to mature in females, and then it gets sperm to develop in men, in their seminiferous tubules. Luteinizing hormone is different. It causes ovulation in females, and I'm going to talk to you more about that in a little bit. And it gets guys to secrete testosterone from their interstitial cells. Okay, so they're all about gonadotropins. So on your list right here, when you see anterior pituitary, and you see one of the things that the anterior pituitary secretes is thyroid stimulating hormone. What triggered thyroid stimulating hormone to be secreted? The hypothalamus giving what? Thyroid releasing hormone. Yeah, the releasing hormone from the neurosecretory cells of the hypothalamus made the anterior pituitary secrete thyroid stimulating hormone, which is carried by the blood to the thyroid gland. Hypothalamus controls the pituitary. Then the pituitary controls all these other glands. Hence the reason, because of all of this, from both the post and the anterior pituitary, it's called the master gland. Okay? So the first one on your notes underneath anterior pituitary is control indirectly through two sets of capillaries. The first set extending into the stalk, and it puts releasing hormones in there, releasing hormones. Second set in the anterior pituitary, where the releasing hormones from the hypothalamus trigger stimulating hormones. You might want to highlight that. Stimulating hormones from the anterior pituitary. So TSH stands for what? Tell me. Thyroid stimulating hormones. So it stimulates the what gland? Thyroid gland. And ACTH stands for adrenal corticotropic hormone, and you're not going to have to memorize all that. ACTH.
Oh, okay.
It stimulates the what gland? Adrenal gland. Specifically the what? Cortex of it. Good. Prolactin stimulates mammary glands to encourage milk production. And gentlemen, you too can have milk production out of your mammary glands if you get a tumor in your pituitary gland, because that overproduction of that prolactin can make you make milk. Yeah. Or he says that's pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
All right.
I mean, it's pretty weird, but it's
yeah.
pretty cool. It's one of those things.
Growth. It's one of those things. Okay. Growth hormone stimulates your what? Yeah, bones and muscles, right, to grow.
I got you.
And then I already gave you FSH and LH stimulates the ovaries and the testes. All right. Not it. One of you needs to get quizzed on the post-pit hormones. One of you needs to be quizzed on the anterior pituitary. Listen to me. Describe it and then they name it. Okay, so decide which one you're going to do. Go.
Yeah, what's my team though?
What team is Kings Canada? You good, Andrew? Rip to you. King, how much is this?
I have a question. Is that usually you don't go like that? If you like sick,
Yeah, I do.
yeah, this is my family. Is that the doctor?
My mom's a pharmacist and she knows all the stuff, so.
You don't go to the doctor, you just go to your mom.
The only time I have to go to the doctor is like about
You hear that?
yeah, we know.
That's sketch though. That's so sketch. Admit that that's sketch.
All right, come back to me.
That is so sketch.
So take a look here. So here you can see her hypothalamus and her pituitary, and you can see it blown up over here. So let's talk about the thyroid gland, because we've got a picture of the thyroid gland here. So what would the hypothalamus be making, secreting? If I'm talking about the thyroid gland, and I was ultimately trying to get more thyroid hormone. TSH, which stands for what? Thyroid stimulating hormone. Now they just said pituitary gland, but where is the specific target for the pituitary? Which pituitary? Anterior pituitary, good. Okay, so thyroid stimulating hormone would stimulate the pituitary gland to secrete what? No, not TSH, go again, TRH. Thyroid releasing hormone would stimulate the pituitary gland to secrete what? Thyroid stimulating hormone. Here is one way to remember it. R in the alphabet comes before S. Okay? So thyroid stimulating hormone would stimulate your what? Thyroid gland. And then your thyroid gland would start to secrete thyroid hormone. This would continue until you had enough thyroid hormone. And then the thyroid hormone would give what? Feedback. What kind of feedback? Negative feedback on both the hypothalamus and the pituitary. Okay? This is a classic example of negative feedback if you had to write an essay on that. And so it's going to be the youngest person's turn to explain that, and here I will bring out the hormones for you to do that.
Max, go ahead. It's all yours.
Start at the top. Isn't it the youngest bio buddy's turn? Okay, go.
Thyroid releasing hormone, right, which then goes to the pituitary gland that causes it to release the thyroid stimulating hormone, which then goes to the thyroid and causes it to release thyroid hormone. And then that has a negative feedback that goes back to the hypothalamus, anterior, whatever, pituitary, and it's like, no, but you gotta share stuff.
Okay, now, to make thyroid hormone, you need iodine. Okay? You need iodine to make thyroid hormone. If you don't have any iodine, you won't have any what? You won't have any thyroid hormone. If there's no thyroid hormone, there's nothing to exhibit any kind of what? Negative feedback. So the hypothalamus will continue to yell at the pituitary, and the pituitary will continue to yell at the thyroid. But yet, still no hormone. The yelling gets louder and louder and louder and louder. And when it does that, then that thyroid gland can get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's called goiter.
Jesus.
Oh, right. Now, I told you you needed iodine in order to make thyroid hormone, right? Now, we don't have a problem like this anymore here in the United States, and the reason is our salt is what kind of salt? Iodized salt. And we usually get plenty of salt in our diet, so as a result we have plenty of iodine, so therefore we don't end up getting goiter. Okay, it's just an enlarged thyroid gland. You know, the thyroid gland is saying, I'm doing the best I can, Captain, but it can't generate any of that thyroid hormone. So it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So anyway, classic example of feedback there. Classic. Okay, next on your notes. Did we hit all? Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I know the pituitary gland is the master gland.
Yes.
But why isn't it the hypothalamus?
Because the hypothalamus isn't a gland, it's true nervous tissue. It's part of your central nervous system. It has those funky neurosecretory cells in it that are kind of neuron, kind of not, but the pituitary gland is a true gland.
Okay, so but if the hypothalamus was a gland, let's say, would that be considered the
Yeah,
master
because it's
gland?
regulating everything else. But the pituitary gland is the one that is actually a gland. Yeah. All right. Now, when you think of diabetes, what gland comes to mind when you think of diabetes? I wish I had something to throw. What? Oh, Islets of Langerhans. Good. In the pancreas, right? Okay. You're right on that. Now, there's another kind of diabetes I want to introduce you to, and this is called diabetes insipidus, because he needs to insipidus some more water. Okay. So, normal. Okay. I would like Blue to be the normal boy, and I'd like Slate to be insipidus boy. Go ahead.
But I have central diabetes insipidus. What does that mean? Because I don't make enough ADH, I make
Somebody who has diabetes insipidus could become what? Dehydrated. You can see by their urine. Okay? Now, occasionally you will urinate very clear urine, and that's not a bad thing, right? When you are hydrated enough, then you will go ahead and have that clear colored urine. Yes?
Do both of these excrete the same amount of waste?
Yeah, it's just how much water, how dilute it is. So you have the same amount of nitrogenous waste over here, but you're losing water. What could that affect if I lost too much water? Homeostasis, think of something else it could affect that you know about. Which then would affect blood pressure. You could have really low blood pressure as a result of having diabetes insipidus. Okay? So on your notes, where you have diabetes under your disorders, diabetes insipidus, you have too little ADH is secreted, not enough water is reabsorbed. Now here you have some other issues. This is with growth hormone. These are both adult males. Okay, these are both adult males. And this looks like a little boy. It's just another form of dwarfism. Most of the dwarfism we see, the head and the torso are proportional to our own head and torso. The arms and legs are just shorter. That's the most common form of dwarfism. But this form of dwarfism, it would be like your body in your normal size, just small, proportions, just smaller. I saw a pituitary dwarf like this once, and it was startling, and this is why. I was in San Diego at the Gas Lamp District, and I was at a bar, but it was a bar that faced the street, and I was sitting on a bar stool, and you're looking out at the street. And I looked to my left, and it looks like a little boy, and he's got his back to me, and he's smoking. And I'm like, is nobody gonna say something to this little boy? Like, do I need to go out there? Where is his mom? And he was like partway in the street, kind of standing in the street a little bit and just smoking at his back to me. And I'm like, this child is like smoking. And then he turns, because he actually came into that same bar. And then I'm like, it's a pituitary dwarf. And he was just, there was like 2 bar stools between he and I. Of course I wanted to take a picture, but I realized that would be totally inappropriate. But I felt so bad for him. It was hard for him to get up there, like those high bar stools, and he was getting up there. And I just wanted to stare because it was so interesting, because it was a full man, like a younger man. I want to say he was in maybe his mid-20s, hard to tell. but maybe mid-20s, and he just was completely, it was just a much smaller version of a person where I thought it was a child. So anyway, that's one example. So on your notes you have pituitary dwarfism, too little GH, and then you also have gigantism.
GH.
What is GH?
Growth
Growth hormone. Who secretes it? Anterior pituitary. Okay, what are the ones from the posterior pituitary? Good, the out hormones. Good. Acromegaly, this one is really kind of sad because you continue to secrete growth hormone in places where you normally stop growing. And so the face is still, you know, bones are still growing, and in the hands they're still growing. She looked like completely normal, younger, and then older. She's beautiful. I know, that's what I always think. That's why, but it's so rude when I say it. So your acromegaly, you already have that overproduction of growth hormone as an adult. And then here you have Cushing Syndrome, and so there was a tumor in this little boy, and then once the tumor was removed, then he's normal looking. This is I think it's 4 months. Did I say that? Yeah, 4 months after his treatment. All right, I think I have a question here.
Let's go.
Oh my god. I hope this isn't on the quiz on my die.
Actually.
Did you? I submitted before you though. It's not working. How did that make you feel?
Actually pretty upset actually.
You see, I look.
All right, so, wow. Okay, so 25 of you got that oxytocin is released through positive feedback and causes uterine contractions. One of you said none of these are correct. You're wrong. No, right? Look at the screen of your bio buddies, see if they're struggling.
Let's do this one.
With.
Go ahead, Matt. Well, immaculate. Immaculate.
Dude, I don't even know what that means.
Oh, whoops, sorry.
Spotless.
We go to the second one. Sorry.
Jordan can come back here, Jordan.
Okay, and here we go. Tall basketball players, giants and dwarfs, a result of too much or too little growth hormone, which secretes this. And let's see, 24 of you said the anterior pituitary, and 1 of you said the posterior pituitary. Krishna. Let's tell Krishna what it is.
It was a missile thing.
That's what they all say.
All right, moving on. So we've already talked about the control of the thyroid gland, and the thyroid gland secretes 2 categories of hormones. Thyroid hormone is really an umbrella. There's a couple of different ones there, but you don't have to distinguish between them. We're just generally speaking thyroid hormone, and the second one is calcitonin. Thyroid hormone is all about your metabolism. What is your metabolism? What's the definition? All the enzyme-mediated reactions of your body? Enzyme-mediated? Okay, good. All right. And then calcitonin, also secreted by the thyroid gland. Calcitonin lowers your blood calcium levels. Now, if you're lowering your blood calcium level, where is it going? Into your what? Into your bones. Yeah, so your calcium level in your bones will increase, right, with more calcitonin. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Now, why do we need to be concerned about the level of calcium that we have in our blood tissue? Synapses, right? It's also important in blood clotting. So you have to have the presence of calcium there as well. So if calcitonin, and the way I remember this is calcitone it down now. Calcitone it down. Lowers the blood calcium levels. Calcitone it down now. The parathyroid gland is an antagonistic hormone to calcitonin. And it secretes parathyroid hormone, PTH. So it will elevate, yes. And it'll take the calcium out of your bones and put it into your blood. And what I want you to think about is, if it's, remember when you studied El Nino in 9th grade foundations, and when you talked about your water budget? And if it rains a bunch somewhere else, it's not raining. Yeah. So it's like there's a finite amount of water. So when you start talking about calcium, if you have parathyroid, which is raising it, then your bones are going to be what? Losing it. And you could see if you hypersecreted parathyroid hormone, what could happen if you hypersecreted parathyroid? You wouldn't have enough calcium in your bones, and you could have issues with that, right? Okay, so just when you think about it, think about all the things. If it's not in the blood, it's in the bones, and these are the two hormones that work towards that. So on your notes, thyroid. Thyroid hormone, multiple targets, regulates metabolism, requires iodine, and then calcitonin lowers blood calcium levels. Jump down to parathyroid. I'll get back up there in just a minute. Parathyroid raises blood calcium, and it's contrary to calcitonin. Contrary to calcitonin. Okay, and then IYOW, in your own words, youngest bio buddy, what is going on here? Go ahead, youngest bio buddy. Explain it.
Hey, what is thyroid hormone?
Exactly.
All right. So what's the word? What's the word you need to put in the highlighted part there?
Iodine.
Iodine. Good job. Okay. Now, not only can you have issues with, that's the thyroid hormone. What's the other hormone secreted by the thyroid gland? No. Calcitonin.
Oh.
And then the parathyroid gland secretes parathyroid hormone. And who just went? Youngest?
Yes.
Oldest? This is yours. Go ahead. Regulate some homeostasis.
So,
So let me talk to you about the homeostasis involving
lower the calcitonin level.
So first, let's talk about calcitonin. Calcitonin comes from pH, thyroid hormone. And what it does is it stimulates calcium in the bones, but reduces CO2 uptake in kidneys. So it basically saves the kidneys. Right, let's talk homeostasis, right? When the calcium level goes up, so it needs to either take the bones.
All right. So we talked about bones, but what other organs are involved in this process? Kidneys. Remember? And we talked about how most people think the kidneys, we just think about urinating, nitrogenous waste. But we know the kidneys are very important in maintaining homeostasis through water balance, right? pH of the blood, besides the nitrogenous waste, and hormones as well, right? We talked about renin, we talked about EPO. We talked about EPO, yeah?
Yeah.
So kidneys play a really important role right here in calcium level by how much calcium is secreted, how much you pee out and how much you maintain, as well as calcium uptake here in the intestines as well. All right, so when things go wrong, you can have something like this, cretinism, and this is hypothyroidism. What does hypo mean? Low, not enough. These gentlemen are all the same age, but because they don't have, right, the amount of, their metabolism level isn't right, they don't develop normally. And as a result of not only does it affect their growth as well, but it affects their brain development, that they don't have a high enough metabolic rate going. You could have issues with it when you're an adult. You could have, this gentleman had hypothyroidism as an adult, and this would be myxedema. And so you could take thyroid meds, take a pill of thyroid hormone in order to kind of get your metabolism right. But remember, it's always harder when you're not doing it naturally through some feedback mechanisms. You're taking an artificial pill, and what one person needs and what another person needs could be very, very different, right? And so you don't have those feedback mechanisms regulating that. Here's another one, hyperthyroidism. This is called Graves' disease. I met somebody with Graves' disease in a bar in Vegas. And it was, again, so wanted to take a picture, but did not. And anyway, got myself in a situation where I got to talk to him, and they were friends of friends. And as we're just talking about Graves' disease, and his eyes they were bulging out of his, eye sockets. And he explained to me what that is connective tissue builds up behind the eye. And so he had already had it done at once where they kind of pull the eye out and scrape the connective tissue from behind and then set that eye back in. I can't even imagine. That sounds hideous to me on so many levels. But that's what causes that. Okay, so that's an example of hyperthyroidism. Yay. All right, so do we have all things thyroid taken care of? All right, let's move on to the adrenal gland. And I'm going to let Slate, you're going to take care of the adrenal cortex, and Blue, you're going to take care of the adrenal medulla. Go ahead. From what you know just so far, go ahead. Okay, now, these are steroid hormones, okay? Glucocorticoids, what do you hear in that? Glucose, so it's going to elevate your blood glucose levels through cortisol, okay? If you've heard of a cortisone shot, cortisol will decrease inflammation. Also, cortisol, that glucocorticoid, that's your wake up in the morning. I'll wake up in the morning. All right, okay, so it helps you to arise in the morning. Some of you might have struggled with that a little bit, right? Due to what? Daylight savings. And this is also related to your pineal gland, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Okay? But sunlight makes that hormone level rise. And that helps you to kind of wake up and get going. Mineral corticoids, you know a mineral corticoid from the adrenal cortex. It starts with an A. Aldosterone. Boom shakalaka. Okay. Okay, so good. And then a little bit of sex hormone. And then epinephrine and norepinephrine, same as adrenaline and noradrenaline, that comes out of your adrenal medulla, and those are protein-based hormones. The way you can think about this would be if I said, okay, we're going to have a pop quiz, and right now, okay, then that's going to be here, fight or flight, epinephrine, noradrenaline. Fight or flight. I choose flight. Sustained stress from your adrenal cortex, that would be like this semester of biology. Okay, it's this school year, the second semester. It's ongoing stress. You never really escape it once the semester starts, right? Until the summer. What?
That's so sad.
It is, isn't it? But see, that's the beauty of your winter break, right? Because winter break, no homework. That was for those purposes of relieving the stress for at least 2 weeks. And though you started your school year in August, you're going to be done at the end of May. So that is Swedish meatballs, right? Okay, now, let's, so you can start in on that English homework. Okay, so come back to me.
Oh my God, Walton.
Can work now.
Oh, yeah.
Is it really?
And that's new. Yep.
That's new.
Yeah.
And there's
Because there's English homework.
But you got screwed over.
Okay. Now come back to me. Or he's like, what?
Why?
Should have gone to that meeting. Okay, now let's look at how this is controlled. Let's bring in our nervous system, okay, to this as well. But first of all, when we look here, look at the neurosecretory cells right of the hypothalamus. That's going to stimulate the anterior pituitary to secrete adrenal corticotropic hormone, right? which is going to get carried to the blood to the adrenal cortex, and you're going to have glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and cortical sex hormones. Here is your mineralocorticoid, aldosterone. That is how the adrenal cortex is controlled. Now look at the adrenal medulla. Okay. Now, when you had your what were the? If I take all of my nervous system, I can break it into two categories. What are they? No. Central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. What are the two components of the central nervous system? Brain and the spinal cord. What are the divisions of the peripheral nervous system? Somatic and autonomic. Now that's of your motor neurons, right? You also have sensory neurons too. Okay. So you have somatic and autonomic. Somatic is what? Choice, right? Autonomic can be divided into parasympathetic and sympathetic. Sympathetic, remember we said, was what? Fight or flight and stress. So sympathetic nervous system right here, path of the nerve impulse. And if you remember, the autonomic nervous system always has two motor neurons in the autonomic nervous system. The only place you don't have the second motor neuron is here in the adrenal medulla. The adrenal medulla only has one motor neuron, and they think the adrenal medulla is the second motor neuron enlarged. Why? Because the adrenal medulla secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is the neurotransmitter of the sympathetic nervous system. With me on that? So when your autonomic nervous system, sympathetic division, has a neurotransmitter, it releases from the synaptic vesicles, it's adrenaline and noradrenaline, or epinephrine and norepinephrine. That is what that gland secretes, the adrenal medulla. It could just be a second motor neuron that has been enlarged and augmented. Okay? So nervous control, endocrine system. So I would like slate, blue. Go.
There's the stress response, long-term endocrine system, and then there's the glucose and then the protein metabolism instead of just straight glucose breakdown, because it's like over time in the long term. There's a reduction of inflammation and immune cells are suppressed, like long-term stress. And there's the mineralocorticoids like sodium ions, water, absorbed by the kidney, and then blood volume and pressure also increases.
All right. On your notes, go to adrenal glands, sit on top of the kidneys. The adrenal medulla is controlled by the ANS. Short-term response to stress. Adrenaline or epinephrine is fight or flight. And noradrenaline, add in a little bit of anger, with anger. And I think I probably gave you an analogy when I first introduced this, that it's like when somebody startles you and you're like, ah, and you're scared, and then you punch them, okay? Then you're mad. You feel startled, and then you're mad about being startled. Or your parents were worried about you, and they start off being worried, and then it transitions into this angry, yelling moment. And you're like, yeah, pure rage. Why are you angry? Adrenal cortex, controlled by adrenal corticotropic hormones, steroid hormones, long-term response to, same word. What's the word? Stress. Glucocorticoids raises blood what levels? Glucose levels. Metabolism suppresses inflammatory response. That's why you might get a cortisone shot, because it suppresses the inflammatory response. Mineralocorticoids regulate salt and water balance by increasing sodium reabsorption by the kidneys. Aldosterone is an example. And then cortical sex hormones. Not it. Okay, there are going to be two pictures. So you can pass on the first one, or you can explain the first one. There's going to be another picture coming right behind it. So here is the first picture. Pass or play on that one.
That's all you do.
Okay, and in the ultimate Secreted by the kidneys, like goes into the blood, goes into
You've seen this before.
signal,
Review.
instruction, pathways, things that attach, get attached, and you get some one, and then
Who secretes this? So smart. All right. Now, you know in the AP exam, they will give you all of those. And then they'll just say, what do you think would happen if? They want to know. And so sometimes you feel like, why did I need to know that? Like, I didn't need to know this. I didn't need to know that. The problem is you don't realize it, but your understanding of the background of that helps you to predict better what will happen under different situations. You just don't realize it because you're so comfortable with it. I'm sure you're comfortable with it. If you passed on that one, this is yours.
That's yours.
Go ahead.
I just
calm down.
Say for the highlight. Okay, so you see there's kidney and a heart.
That's the kidney. That's the liver.
You see that right top there? You see the body, the kidney. The right is the and it's the pituitary, and it's the anterior.
There's 6 different organs really technically involved here, right? If you look at all of these controlling blood pressure, there's a lot, okay? That must be really important. Because remember, blood pressure is going to affect all of the what? Exchange at the capillaries, okay? A balance between, what were the 2 pressures again? Hydrostatic and osmotic. Excellent. All right, when things go wrong, okay? Addison's disease, adding in a little color, bronzing of the skin, excessive ineffective secretions of ACTH. So the adrenal gland is non-responsive. So that anterior pituitary is secreting ACTH, but the adrenal gland is going na 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 na. So as a result, you have low levels of cortisol, which means low glucose, and aldosterone, so that means dehydration. Because you look at, you know what happens as a result. So this one thing here, okay, can impact so many other things. And on your notes, I think we're good on that. Okay, moving on. Not it. Pass or play on this first diagram. Go ahead.
So, right, the pancreas is both an exocrine gland for digestion and endocrine.
And here is your second slide. And this should be review. You've already done this once before, so go. I yow.
This one's the
Low blood glucose. I'm actually telling you. We could have been out of school half an hour for
and if there was no school, I couldn't figure it out.
What if there was just no lunch? Actually would. Alright, low blood glucose.
Okay, on the pancreas, the introduction. It acts as an exocrine gland in digestion.
No, Max, no.
And as, super annoying, Ori. And acts as an endocrine gland, islets of Langerhans secreting hormones. The hormones, insulin will lower blood glucose, and glucagon will raise blood glucose. Now, one thing to think of, so you don't get confused, I think glucagon, because it looks like glucagon, like it's going to lower. So just keep remembering glucagon, it's going to elevate that blood sugar. Now, there could be, how many of you know somebody who has diabetes? Raise your hand if you know somebody who has diabetes. Look at how many of us. Good grief. Okay, now, 2 types, juvenile onset and maturity onset. And let me just differentiate. Juvenile onset, what happens is you do not make enough insulin. Okay, you do not make enough, so you have to get like some shot of insulin, or you have a pump. And it could be due to an autoimmune disease, destruction of those, what are they called? Islets of Langerhans, okay? So you don't make enough insulin. That is type 1. Type 2 is maturity onset. They say maturity onset because it doesn't usually happen to children. It happens when you're used to be just older. but there's also a direct connection between that and being overweight. And I am assuming because type 2 is when your cells become non-responsive to insulin, or they just go na 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 na, and probably because you have so many sugars in your bloodstream all the time, so many sugars, that you have so much insulin that pretty soon your cells like go, eh. Similar to, if you think about it this way, if you first get in a hot tub or a hot bath, at first it's like hot, 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 and then pretty soon you're just like, and you get used to it. It's not that it's become less hot, though it can over time, but if it's a hot tub, the temperature is maintained. Okay, it's that your body is like going, it's still just as hot, but you're not responding to it. You're not sending a signal to your brain anymore going hot, 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 hot. That's why it is not good to have young children in hot tubs, because after a while their body stops sending the signal that it's too hot, and they can become what? Overheated. And that can be very dangerous for them. Okay, so similar to that, if you keep eating a lot of sugar all the time and a lot of crap all the time, your body's going to start going, I always have insulin. This doesn't mean anything. It's like if your parent yells all the time, yelling doesn't have a huge impact because they always flip and yell. Okay? So to you, it's just rah, 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 rah. But if they only yell occasionally, the yelling means more, right? Yeah. So that is maturity or type 2. So let's watch. This first video is way 1970s, but I still like it.
Glucose enters the bloodstream where the body breaks down food to use as fuel. The level of glucose in our blood is controlled mainly by the pancreas, which manufactures and releases the hormone insulin. Insulin works like a key, allowing the body's cells to take glucose up out of the bloodstream and store or use it as energy. In diabetes, two complications can arise. If the pancreas does not release enough insulin, the body's tissues can't take up glucose fully, and glucose levels in the bloodstream rise. The problem is compounded when tissues are insulin resistant and don't respond properly to insulin. Again, the cells can't take up glucose appropriately, and glucose levels in the bloodstream rise.
Okay. Now, a lot of times that can be regulated by diet, that if you just decrease the amount of food you have, sometimes that will work. But sometimes you have to take a drug for that. And this next video, they talk about that a little bit. I want you to follow the graphs and the charts, because as you saw in your practice AP exam, charts are big, right? And graphs and interpretation. So here we go.
As blood glucose levels increase after a meal, non-diabetics release insulin.
That's the red.
Insulin signals the cells in muscle and liver to take up glucose from the blood. This causes blood sugar levels to return to normal. In untreated type 1 diabetes, no insulin is released and blood sugar levels remain high. Type 1 diabetes is treated by injection of exogenous insulin. This insulin has the same effect as normal insulin. In type 2 diabetes, insulin is released in response to a blood glucose increase, but the cells do not receive the signal. One treatment for type 2 diabetics is Avandia, an oral thiazolidinedione that increases cell sensitivity to normal insulin. An effective treatment for obese patients is metformin, an oral medication that blocks liver synthesis of glucose.
Okay, so one is, the first one makes them more sensitive, so maybe they will start listening to insulin, so the message can get out there. It removes the, earmuffs on their ears. The second one for obese patients is, let's just make sure you don't make glucose. Your liver stores glucose as glycogen, and then it can break it back down into glucose. If your glucose levels are already too high, let's just not have your liver do that. That was that second drug they recommend. So you're solving it in a different way. Okay, because you can't get the glucose to go away. So let's just get, don't allow the liver to break down and add to the problem. Yes?
So the body isn't able to use the glucose, and that's why the glucose levels are getting higher, right?
Well, at different times in the day, like right after you eat something, your glucose levels are probably going to be higher.
Yeah.
So our body brings those back down with insulin. But if you are eating a lot of glucose all the time, your glucose levels are going to be high, and pretty soon your cells ignore it. That would be type 2. So it's normal for our blood glucose levels to fluctuate. We just normally get them back in to a certain level that's appropriate.
Okay, so I'm just wondering if the body isn't able to use the glucose, like for example, the insulin isn't working properly to allow the muscle to use
Right.
glucose, then are they just feeling tired all the time? If they can't.
Possibly. I don't know all of the side effects of not having that. The only one I know about is the extreme side effects of, because the tissues don't have that glucose in their cells, some tissues die. And people, that's why when you see people getting a leg amputated or something, and sometimes they lose their sensitivity at the bottom of their feet, so they'll be walking and they don't even know that they've hurt themselves, and they get really bad infections and things like that, and that can lead to amputations. So I know the ultimate bad thing, I don't know if they feel tired or not. Yeah, I don't know, but I'm sure you can Google that. I'm curious. I mean, that logically makes sense to me, you know. Okay, like you don't have enough energy. And then you can see how that would be tied into somebody who's already obese because of maturity onset and they don't feel like they have enough energy. They're probably not going to start working out. Testosterone, yeah. Testosterone. A testosterone. Okay, yeah, next one we're going to talk about now, we're going to get into the different hormone levels, and we're actually going to start with the females. And I would like you to pick your top 2 effects of estrogen and share that to your bio buddy. Go ahead, top 2 effects.
Also, 2 also, estrogen stimulates the maturation
Okay. Now, I want you to take a big breath in. Take a big breath in. Let it out. Whether you have a menstrual cycle or not, Pituitary Girl is going to explain it to you here. Okay?
Oh, wow.
Okay, so, and I am going over the menstrual cycle. I've given you the notes for it all filled in. I threw down the honors bio notes. We don't, it's not one of our main systems we have to know, but the menstrual cycle has a lot in there with positive and negative feedback, so I could see it being a question, okay? So the first thing I want you to see here, and you already know this first part about how the hypothalamus talks to the pituitary. So sit up right here. I've got some motions for you. Point right here. Everybody sit up, sit up, sit up, and point. Waiting, Ori. So the hypothalamus talks to the pituitary. The pituitary talks to the ovaries. Okay, so let's do this again. Here we go. The hypothalamus talks to the pituitary. The pituitary talks to the ovaries. Now the ovaries secrete hormones that talk to the uterus and give feedback to the hypothalamus and the pituitary. Okay, that's just that. Okay, so do that with me again. Here we go. The hypothalamus talks to the pituitary. The pituitary talks to the ovaries. The ovaries secrete hormones that talk to the uterus and give feedback to the hypothalamus and the pituitary. Now, I'm going to name some hormones there for you. The hypothalamus secretes GnRH, which stands for gonadotropic releasing hormones. You with me? So the hypothalamus tells the pituitary, secrete those gonadotropic hormones. Do you remember which 2 gonadotropic hormones you have? LH was one of them. What was the other one? FSH. FSH and LH. So what happens is FSH and LH get secreted by the pituitary gland. Okay, now, in different concentrations at different times. So let me walk you through this. FSH stands for, eyes up here, I really want you to get this. FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormones. Do you remember what I told you a follicle was? The jacket around the egg. Good. So this makes your ovaries, the two hormones that they talk here with, okay, are estrogen and progesterone. You know what's really super handy? All of these hormones are secreted in alphabetical order, in sequence. I appreciate that very much, okay? So the first one of those two, when the hypothalamus secretes gonadotropic hormone, now the pituitary is going to, or gonadotropic releasing hormone, then the pituitary is going to secrete which one first? FSH, which is going to impact the ovaries. In the ovaries, the follicle stimulating hormone will stimulate the egg in there. That egg will start to release what? Estrogen. Estrogen talks to your uterus. And what do you think we want the uterus to do if we're maturing an egg? We want the uterine lining to build, because we're getting ready to create a little home, okay? So the uterine lining builds. And this exerts positive feedback on the hypothalamus and pituitary. So it secretes even more, and so on and so on. You keep maturing the egg and you keep building the uterine lining. That is positive feedback, okay? See, coming out of the estrogen, we've got positive feedback right here. Now, when the level gets high enough, now the hypothalamus secretes much gonadotropic releasing hormone. Get a little increase in it, which then makes the pituitary gland secrete the second hormone, which is what? LH. And LH stands for luteinizing hormone. Let me tell you what this causes. If the estrogen level is high enough, that must mean the uterine level is high enough, right? The lining. So now you're ready for that egg to pop. LH is the ovulation hormone. It makes the egg pop out of your ovaries. Okay? Now, once the egg pops out of the ovaries, the jacket, the follicle, becomes a yellow, goopy glob mess on the ovary, though small. And it, again, what did we say about the ovaries? They secrete hormones that, okay, so what's the second hormone? Progesterone. This time it secretes progesterone. What progesterone is going to talk to the, what? Uterus. And it tells the uterine lining to maintain. So as long as the corpus luteum is secreting progesterone, your uterine lining is maintaining. Why? Because we're waiting to see if it gets not a sperm, an egg, but more importantly, a zygote. Yeah. Because if the sperm fertilizes the egg will secrete a hormone, okay? And human chorionic gonadotropin, okay? So it'll secrete a hormone that will be a signal, okay, to say, maintain, we've got a pregnancy here. So your corpus luteum will continue to secrete progesterone because you're pregnant until about the 10th week of development, where it will secrete its own when you have the placenta, and it secretes progesterone now on its own. So now we're golden. But let's say the egg doesn't get fertilized, okay? Egg, swing and a miss, okay? Doesn't get fertilized. And so there's no HCG. And as a result, if there's no HCG, then what happens is that yellow goopy corpus luteum, it'll just start to atrophy and waste away, okay? And when it does that, it stops secreting what hormone? Progesterone. When the progesterone level drops, you don't maintain the uterine lining anymore, you shed it, and you get your period. And now, keep in mind, you don't want to be like 6 months pregnant and 9 months pregnant simultaneously, right? Okay? Because everything's coming out when you have a baby. So this progesterone that we talked about maintaining exerts what kind of feedback? Negative feedback on the hypothalamus, the pituitary, saying, don't start another cycle. Don't start another cycle till we know if this one has launched anything or not. So once the progesterone level falls off and you get your period, that is the first day of your new cycle, because all of this switched back on again. Now again, gonadotropin, and now again FSH, to start the whole thing all over again. That is day 1 of your cycle. See how it all works together? And it has both positive and negative feedback. Okay, let's take a look at this picture. Okay, so here it's showing you just the ovaries. Okay, What is going to make this egg develop? Do you remember what hormone is going to make that egg develop? FSH. Right. So FSH, right, secreted by your anterior pituitary, is going to make this egg develop. And as this egg develops, what out of this follicle, what hormone is going to happen? Estrogen. Okay? Estrogen is then going to go talk to the uterus, making the uterine lining do what? Build up. As the estrogen level gets higher and higher, this will go back to the hypothalamus and the pituitary, right? They're going to secrete much GnRH, and now you're going to get what out of the anterior pituitary? Not FSH, but LH. When LH, it's going to make this happen. Out goes the egg. Luteinizing hormone, luteinizing hormone. It makes then this empty follicle become this yellow goopy mess called the corpus luteum, hence luteinizing hormone, corpus luteum. Now, this corpus luteum is going to secrete what hormone? Progesterone. And progesterone will tell this lining maintain, 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 and it'll exert what kind of feedback? Negative feedback, saying, wait, let's see if we have a pregnancy. No pregnancy, then you can see this corpus luteum is now atrophying. No more progesterone, no more uterine lining. This is when you get your period. Okay? And as a result of getting that period, right, you're ready to start the whole thing all over again. See? See how easy the menstrual cycle is? You could go home and explain that to your mother. Okay? Now, I have numbered the steps here for you. And I want Slate to do all the odd steps and Blue to do all the even steps. And we're getting to those testes, so hang on. Okay, go.
I'll text him after Jeff.
And then the pituitary.
Then FSH develops the egg, then estrogen, negative feedback. Step 6. Just want to wait if something happens.
Then GnRH is again
Are you good on the numbers? You need me to help you with them at all, or are you good?
What's GnRH?
What?
What's GnRH?
GnH is gonadotropic releasing hormones. And the two gonadotropic hormones are FSH and LH.
Oh, okay, so it's having some release.
Yeah.
And then
all right, now, I want to show you this. This is just showing you about luteinizing hormone, and this is showing you the hormone levels that are coming out of the pituitary and how it affects the ovary and the levels in uterine lining. There are pictures if you want to spend more time on that, you can in your book, but it's in the reproduction chapter. I can't, 42 or something, I can't remember off the top of my head. Yes?
why do some girls have heavier periods than
others?
others?
Oh, very good question. So some body tissues like respond differently. I had terrible periods in high school when they got progressively worse. And I had to go on birth control because I was a whore. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, dang it. Stupid. I saw the iPad as I was walking around the corner. Kidding. It was because I had hideous periods, and I was like a stabbing victim. It was terrible. And I would have to take the day off school when I was in high school, and if you were in sports or anything, that it was like, I couldn't do anything. It was just terrible. And I got so sick. I wasn't one like psychotic, though some women can become psychotic, but what happens is when those progesterone levels change, they say it's supposed to be like progesterone, and then you have your period. Now my mom went, progesterone, estrogen, like this. So I would build up these big layers, and then I would shed them. And my sister used to get so sick when she was in high school and like college age. She had to go to the emergency room to get like shots to be put out for the day. It was that bad. And so we had just like these psychotic hormones. And so everybody is just different. And so I went on the pill in order to kind of maintain that. And this is a good segue, because what the pill does is the reason why it's effective is it keeps your progesterone levels high. It's a mixture of estrogen and progesterone so that your body homeostasis-wise, thinks that you're what? Pregnant. Yeah. And if you're pregnant, right, then you're not going to ever what? Not just shedding. You're not going to get pregnant. Why? Because you always have what kind of feedback? Negative feedback on your hypothalamus and your pituitary.
Oh.
So you don't ever what? You don't ever ovulate. And so what happens is when you take your first day of your pill pack, that's a high level of progesterone, and it has estrogen in there too, so you still build up your uterine lining. But then when you stop taking your pill pack, all of a sudden the progesterone level drops, and you can have a period, but immediately it pops back up. It never allows you to develop that follicle in order to mature an egg so you don't end up getting pregnant. Secondary effect is it makes the uterine lining inhospitable, and that's why some people say they don't want to take it, because it would be like a mini abortion if you did fertilize an egg, because it wouldn't allow it to implant. Well, yeah, so everybody is different. Some people have hideous periods, and some people are like, fine, you know. Lucky you. You probably get pregnant easy if you have hideous periods, you know, because the hormones will be like ready to go. And here, speaking of pregnancy, here's the egg. Is you're ovulating here, and this looks like they're synchronized swimmer sperm for the fallopian swim team, and they're around uniformly. But here, it's fertilizing, and then here, HCG is getting secreted by the egg to maintain the corpus luteum, so it maintains that uterine lining during a pregnancy. And then the placenta will take over at about the 10th week and secrete its own progesterone. Okay, now let's get to some guys now. Influence of testosterone. So pick your two favorite testosterone effects for men. Go ahead.
Okay, for sure. And muscle mass, dude.
Okay, now I'm going to jump in here. Gentlemen, if you struggle with acne, that is because you are so manly. Okay, you might also become bald later too, but it's because of your high levels of testosterone. That's what is the deal with the acne. Now let's take a look at this. Same thing, hypothalamus and pituitary. Now we do have some testes down here. Okay, and so you can see follicle stimulating hormone generates what? Spermatogenesis, which is a formation of sperm, and you know the process, meiosis, right? Generating a lot of sperm, okay? And then luteinizing hormone triggers testosterone from your interstitial cells, and again gives feedback to both the hypothalamus and the pituitary. When your sperm levels are, when your seminiferous tubules have enough sperm, because think about it, these are cells that are generating a tremendous millions of sperm. Right? Millions of sperm. What happens if you never ejaculated? Okay, then what your testes would like, it'd be like goiter of the testes, right? And so that could be a problem. So, no, but you see what I mean about the feedback? So you also have inhibin. I've never put those words together like ever in my life. Goiter of the testes. I'm so glad I did it for the class. Somebody walks around, I got goiter of the testes. Anyway, sorry, it's getting worse. I didn't get enough sleep last night. I'm sorry. So inhibin will give negative feedback. It's like my alarm went off at 3:23 this morning, right? No, I get up at 4. Oh. Yeah. Okay, so on that note, side effects of steroid use, come up with 2 good reasons, each of you, why you shouldn't use steroids. Go ahead. Besides apparently losing your penis altogether. Go ahead.
You can get pretty sus, dude. No, stop. Stop.
All right, here, we're moving on. So on your notes, do I owe you anything there? No. Okay, good deal. And they're all in green, if you see on there, rest of the notes. Okay, pineal gland. Your pineal gland, here's your thalamus right here. So pineal gland is here in your brain. Pineal gland, it secretes melatonin. melatonin, which is what we're getting affected by right now, and tomorrow is going to be an even harder day, you guys. So if you're going to go to bed, try to get to bed early tonight. Which means, listen to me, bless you, no procrastinating today, okay? When you get home, I know a lot of you have practice and other things, and then you're hungry or whatever you have to do. Today is a no procrastination day. Commitment, early to bed, okay? Because it will be harder tomorrow than it was today, okay? So, melatonin. What melatonin does is as you sleep, the melatonin levels will rise. And if you get up in the middle of the night to pee or something, and you turn on a light, what's going to happen to the melatonin levels? They crash, right? And then it's possible when they crash, it'll never like recover, and you won't sleep as well. Some of you will wake, I don't know about your sleepiness, do any of you experience like when you're stressed out, you wake up multiple times during the night? Yes. That's not just an adult thing? Okay, so I will, if I've got a lot to do, and I'm thinking about the next day and what I have to get done, and it's super annoying, but I'll wake up and I'll check the clock. Now, the clock I check is on my cable box. I don't generally check my phone. As soon as I look at the light on my cable box, what is going to happen to my melatonin levels? It drops. And then I won't get to sleep as well again, which means I'll wake up and want to check the cable box again and a little bit lower. So you have to trust your alarm clock and just go, I'm not even going to look at the time. My alarm clock's going to go over when my alarm clock goes off, and I'm just going to go back to sleep, okay? And try to do that, because that will help. And this is all tied ultimately to reproduction, because it's when animals need to in order to have a baby in the springtime, right? So you want to reproduce when the melatonin levels are high for long amounts of time, because that means probably gestationally you'll have a baby in the spring, so that they have the spring and the summer to develop. Yes?
Why do like smaller kids have like night lights in the room? Wouldn't that mess up with their
Exactly. You shouldn't. Just let them sleep.
Oh,
We might have raised a whole generation of children who don't sleep as well because of those night lights. Yeah. Now, go ahead.
So, are you saying that melatonin is there's more melatonin during the winter?
Yes, because the nights are longer in the winter. Remember long day plants, short night, short night. Remember that all? Yeah, same. We're all just, it's like our own PFR. Go ahead.
Does melatonin, does that promote you to have a
better sleep?
Not just that, but to promote animals to reproduce?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's depending on which way you're traveling, you might need to take melatonin if you need to sleep longer, because you have, right, as you're traveling, because the sun comes up easier sooner when you fly to the east, right? Okay, now, on your notes on that one, go to pineal gland. The hormone is melatonin. Gland in your brain, it has to do with your circadian rhythms and your daily behaviors. So this morning your alarm went off a full hour earlier than what you're used to, so your circadian rhythms are totally off. This also might lead to, I'm going to tell you, because of exhaustion, you might want to eat carbs more today. It's like you want more food today. Are you with me on that? Yeah, you want more carbs because you're tired, and that'll help raise your blood sugar when it's really just exhaustion. Okay? Thymus gland, you already know it, you already love it. The thymus gland secretes what's called thymosins, and this is for T cell maturation. So thymus gland hormone is thymosin. And then you have other hormones, and the other are because they're secreted from tissues and cells, not glands dedicated as part of your endocrine system, but tissues and cells are secreting them. One is your fat cells will secrete leptin to let you know sense of fullness, like stop eating. And I always think leap up from the table, leap away from the table, however you want to think about it. And sometimes when we're starving, our hands are shaking, and we're starving, we go home and eat the kitchen. And you're just like, ah. When you do that process, you don't allow the feedback mechanisms to regulate your sense of fullness, and that's when you're like, I don't feel so good, okay? Because you're way overly full, okay? So produced by fat cells, it's a sense of fullness. EPO, secreted by our kidneys to stimulate the production and maturation of red blood cells. We know how that's tied in because our kidneys are very well synced with blood pressure as well. So they're going to contribute red blood cells, or the production of red blood cells. Growth factors. And guys, there's no women I have ever run into, except maybe those she-ras at the gym, who find this attractive in any way. You know, those she-ras, it's like, I got a man, a woman, scary, she's gonna punch me. These growth factors, okay, and I gave you that one already, released by many tissues and stimulates cell division. And then prostaglandins. Prostaglandins, these are interesting because these are not carried everywhere in your body. They just affect neighboring cells. And ultimately, most of the time, they do contradictory items here, but most of the time they enhance pain. Why would we ever want something to enhance pain? So we can what? React or stop doing or investigate. It gives your body a sense like this is injured, lay off of it. Okay? So prostaglandins act locally. Act locally. Review tomorrow 7th for your quiz on Wednesday. Questions?
Oh, I just had something to say. For acne scar treatment, you know,
Yes.
they have this kind of roller technique where they take like a wheel with tiny little needles on it. They puncture the skin, and what that does, it triggers the skin to start healing. And so it's like, you know,
I didn't know that.
It reacts to the pain. So
that you don't get scar tissue.
Right, so it can get rid of the scar.
Oh, because it reacts to the pain?
Right, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's very clever. I hope you heard that. Have a great afternoon.